Good afternoon. I had the distinction of being the only socialist Marxist economist in the city, so I'm very proud of that. But I think the one economist that did predict the financial crisis, he's dead, and he did say, I told you it would end like this. I think we can also learn from the work that Keynes did in the 30s on the Depression. If you combine those two economists to analyse what happened and what are the alternatives. When I was given the title Hope, I thought the Obama campaign was running this conference. Hope. How airy-fairy is that? You know, especially for an economist. But then I actually looked up the meaning in the dictionary, and it said, it's what we need and dream of can be achieved, and that's the key thing. We can achieve what we want. And that's what I'm going to try and set out today. I'm going to set out what our economy would look like, what we have to do to get there, and basically how we can finance it. That's the big question that the No campaign are throwing at us just now. Just a kind of broad outline of what the economy would look like. We'd say it's an economy driven by meeting people's needs and the democratic needs of the nation in a participatory framework from the bottom up, not from the top down. It would be an economy largely under public ownership and control. It would be an environmentally sustainable economy that everyone could participate and benefit from. That's a broad outline of what it should look like. Now, I think the question of can we afford it is probably the key question for the Yes campaign. There are lots of great ideas here. I support all the work on the women's issues, on minorities, getting rid of nuclear weapons, getting rid of the monarchy, having a new democracy that goes way beyond Hollywood, that involves hundreds of thousands of people in the decision-making, forming the ideas. But when we go out on the doorsteps, the questions that people are asking, can we afford it? Will I have a job? Will my children have a job? Will my grandchildren have a job? And who's telling the truth? Who's got the accurate data? I'm going to throw a few numbers around here, so I'm very much a traditional economist. One number that we throw around a lot is 1 billion, so just in case you don't know what that is, it's 1,000 million. I'm also going to talk about deficit. So a lot of people aren't quite sure what the deficit is. It's how much more we spend on public services compared to what we take in taxes. And the final term I'll throw about quite a lot is debt. And that's basically how much we must borrow to cover our deficit on an annual basis, and it becomes cumulative. Okay, what's the state of our economy just now? Since 2009, we have made, in our devolved Scottish economy, £5 billion of real cuts. About 450 million has come from the council tax fees, which is a mildly progressive taxation. We have a debt of about 110 billion. That's what would be allocated to us based on our percentage of the population. On an annual basis, and the deficit varies from year to year, and I'll come on to why it varies, is on average about 12 billion. We pay about 7.5% of the income tax of the whole UK, and we have a population of about 8.4%. And we're spending more than our population, about 9.5%. We've got a funding gap each year, even if we have the nationalised oil revenues on a private basis, we have a gap of about 17 billion that we've got to find. So that's before we even start. What would we want to do? We'd want to reverse the cuts. We'd want to pay down the deficit. We'd want to have our own currency under our control. We don't want a currency that's run by another country or another region where they would impose their economic policies on us. We want a public banking system. As Patrick said, we have effectively got a public banking system. It's just that we don't control it and we don't use it for the public benefit. Most of our resources are privately owned. The real key here is North Sea oil. Unfortunately, it's got a finite length of time. And one of the things we want to do is move from a fossil-based economy to a renewable energy economy. North Sea oil revenues are very volatile in the hands of the private sector. That's because the oil price is driven by geopolitical factors, it's driven by the supply and demand of the world economy, it's basically driven by the oil companies as well. How much oil we pull out each year depends on how much the oil companies want to make in profit. So just to give you an example of the last 10 years of the kind of where the oil price has gone, it's gone from a low of $27 up to 140, back down to 40, back up to 110. It would not be possible to build a stable economy based on just 30% of those oil revenues. That's how much we basically get in terms of taxation. We would have to go for full nationalisation of the oil industry. There's currently about $25 billion of oil, barrels of oil in the North Sea. At a very, very conservative price of $80 a barrel and $10 cost, that would give us a revenue, if it was under public ownership, of £55 billion a year for 20 years. We could decide how we would spread that out, but that would allow us to start funding some of the projects that we need to do to convert to a renewable energy economy. The first thing we would do would obviously build a renewable energy industry. We would need to design, construct, assemble and service our industry. Instead of saying to the workers that govern, you can build ships, don't worry about it, you can build weapons of mass destruction, we should be saying to them, when Scotland gets independence, your jobs will be guaranteed, we'll create more jobs for you, and you'll be building our renewable energy industry. Similarly to the workers at Grangemouth, we should be saying to them, under an independent Scotland, you would be part of a public industry that would be owned and controlled by the people of Scotland. You would have good jobs, at good wages, at reasonable conditions. You would not be bullied by a big international tyrant. You'd be part of a future, a Scottish future, a future under our control. As Patrick said, for the banking sector, we already own it. As part of the settlement with the UK, we could quite simply say, we'll take the banking industry off your hands and we'll write off that debt that you've invested. We'll turn it into a people's investment bank that not only looks after your current account, your savings account, but would be a national, a local, a regional, a city bank that would fund all of these projects that would be publicly funded, under our control, that would create hundreds of thousands of jobs for people in Scotland. I think the final thing that we do with the money, and there'll be lots more ideas out there, is we create environmentally friendly housing at low rent and low cost that's affordable for all of us. And with that £55 billion a year, we create a reserve fund, a genuine reserve fund. Without nationalising the oil, we can't create a reserve fund. Do you know the size of the Norwegian reserve fund? They roughly started in the early 90s. I was very fortunate to advise them in setting it up. The size of their fund is $800 billion. So they've managed to put that money aside as well as rebuild their economy. We can potentially still do that for Scotland. My sums are basically worked out at a very conservative oil price of $80 a barrel. Anything above that can be put into the reserve fund and be used for future projects. The IFS are right about one thing. We are going to raise taxes. We're going to raise taxes on the rich, on the wealthy. We're going to close down tax avoidance. There is one thing we are going to cut, and that's Trident. those four savings together would bring us another £5 billion a year. So you can already see just nationalising the oil, some progressive taxation to make us a fairer society. We're massively in black. We'd be one of the richest countries in the world. We would be an inspiration to how to rebuild an economy that's fair, equal, that everybody can participate in. Of course, you can't build an island of what I call people, not profit, in a sea of profit. But we could have a dual economy which is heavily dominated by a democratically owned and planned and participated in nation that would dominate a smaller private economy. I call that people before profit. It would be the beginning of building another Scotland, but it's part of the road to building another world. A world that is not only possible but necessary. I would want us to link up with the radical movements in South America, the progressive governments there, the people who are fighting austerity in Southern Europe. We would trade with them, exchange what we have with what they have in a kind of progressive trade alliance. Yes, another Scotland is possible, another world is necessary for these people. Let's go out in 2014 and make that happen.